But before we go to that question, I believe we have to, like I had to make a preparation. And the preparation was twofold. I had to ask what my own mental attitude was, and then I had to create an atmosphere. Now, why these things? Number one, I had to check my own mental attitude. Because all of us, me, you, everyone, has within our minds, blended in there, at least three distinct attitudes. One is the attitude of a believer, two, an attitude of a skeptic, and three, the attitude of an inquirer. And many times we do not know which is the attitude we are bringing to the table at which particular point of time. What are these attitudes? And I am not describing any people. I am describing an attitude that all of us have. The attitude of a skeptic, believer, and inquirer. Let's look at some of the statements that could possibly give us an idea of what I mean by this. A skeptic will dismiss the report prior to thorough investigation. A believer will accept a report prior to thorough investigation, whereas an inquirer will hold verdict till the investigation is done. A skeptic will focus on the question to the exclusion of the evidence. A believer will focus on the evidence to the exclusion of the questions. An inquirer will focus on the weight of evidence. A skeptic will disbelieve in the face of reasonable evidence. A believer will believe in the face of big questions. An inquirer will accept reasonable evidence even if some questions remain, because questions will always remain. There is nobody on earth who can ever stand up and say, I've got it all. Nobody. Our minds are just too small to make such a wide sweeping statement and a claim. So questions will remain. But we were looking for evidence that will sway the pendulum to the side that is most reasonable. That is an inquirer. So, for the few hours that we are going to spend together tonight and tomorrow and the next 2 days, 3 days actually, what attitude shall we bring to this search? The attitude of an inquirer. Remember, it is very difficult to really grasp which attitude you are bringing at any particular time. So we need to remind ourselves often, and I would like you to do that. Often remind yourself, you are not a skeptic, you are not a believer at this point. You are an inquirer. Number 2 of these preparation. How many attempts do you think to gain the top of Mount Everest were successful? 100%? No. 0%? No. Some of them did reach the top. Many of them were stalled halfway or 3/4 of the way, especially as they got to the top, because the atmospheric conditions blocked them. Too much ice, too much snow, too much wind, too deep temperatures, not enough oxygen. And this huge, big expedition had to stop, turn your foot backwards and go back. All that expensive preparation gone. Because the atmospheric conditions were just insurmountable. Fortunately for us, we can create an atmosphere. And I believe there are 4 things we need to create that atmosphere. Number 1, humility. Number 2, honesty. Number 3, calmness. And number 4, respect. All 4 are important. If you miss out on any one of them, it'll become a roadblock. What do I mean by these 4? Number 1, humility. It is paramount. If ever you puff up your chest and say, I know, then you will not know the next thing. The first ingredient of any search, and if you want to join me in that, is to be humble. What do you mean by humble? It's the smallness you feel when standing before the vastness, grandeur, and majesty of truth. We are not even describing what truth, but everybody knows that truth with a capital T is really awesome and great out there. And if you have to stand in front of truth, then you are so small. You are not big. So let's square our shoulders and lift our chins up and say we know it all. Humility is the number one ingredient. Sometimes we do feel humility also when we look at others around us who have a wealth of knowledge. We should become humble. Then our mind is mellowed enough so that when information comes, we are able to accept it as an inquirer. Number two is honesty. You know, in my 20 years of search, when I was going through this period, talked to a lot of people. Honesty is a scarce commodity, especially when it comes to religious views. Oh, the way they will say it. Do you know this? Of course. What does it say? Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you. And in a little while, the words are not all that confident. And then when the evening comes along, when nobody else is listening, if you sit down quietly and say, hey, do you really know? And then they will say, actually, I don't. Then why did you start off so big? Honesty is a scarce commodity. It is widespread. And don't think only they are dishonest. All of us are. I was also when I started out. And I said, hey, that's the way I made all the claims. And so because it's so widespread, so deeply embedded in us, I had to give it a definition, my own definition, and I had to apply that definition rigorously. And here's the definition of honesty. The willingness to give credit to a point or an argument, no matter who brings it up, even if that acknowledgement might destroy my previous standing. Are you ready to be honest? Yeah. I call it the wow factor. We should be ready to say wow if something is impressive. And not first think, shall I say wow or not? Because if I do, then it will destroy what I was holding on to all this while. No. Honesty requires that if there is a piece of information that comes at you, sweeping, strong, and big, then we stand there and say, wow. No matter who gets the credit. Are you with me? Okay. No matter who gets the credit. Wow factor. There will be some wows because, during the search of this extended period, there are many things that I came across that I had to just stand and say, wow. Because I didn't know it was there all along. So when I do it, go ahead and say, wow. Go ahead and say, yeah, pretty good. Or if it's not all that impressive, say, I don't think so. Or if you disagree, no, not with me. Anything as long as you have a response, then you and I are on the same page as inquirers. We are allowed to disagree, but be honest in your disagreement. The third one is calmness. Way back in 1879, Thomas Alva Edison, anybody familiar with that name? He invented the electric bulb. Do you know how many experiments he tried before he got that bulb to burn and brightly? Over 1,028 experiments. One of the problems that he had was trying to balance heat and light in that delicate filament inside the bulb. It would burn, and as it glowed, it would get too hot, and the contact points would break. Or it wouldn't even glow at all. That was his challenge. How would he balance heat and light inside that filament? Do you know religious discussions are exactly the same? It can get so dull and boring that the speaker himself is falling half asleep on his own sentences. Or it can get so bitter and vitriolic, you pull your shoulders this way, I won't talk with you again. Not only I won't talk with you, I'll pull out my guns and my bombs and my rockets. Right? Just go to the Middle East today. It's there. The reason is religious ideas somehow embed themselves pretty deep into our emotions and our hearts. And we do not like it being tugged at all. It hurts. And so you respond and react. And it causes a great deal of emotions. And so we need calmness. The willingness to keep my volatile emotions in check, because I have chosen to be humble and honest. In my humility, I acknowledge I don't know enough. And in my honesty, I state that. And when I say that I don't know, but I'd like to know, then I can remain calm. I don't have to fight for my own views at all. I will just remain calm enough to accept it. Because if we are not calm, then reason and judgment will fly out the window with your emotions. They'll be pushed out. And once reason and judgment are gone, your conclusions will be anything but fair and just. We've got 3. Humility, humbleness, honesty, and you're going to remain calm. Why do we want to remain calm? Like I said, the emotional content of religious ideas run very deep. And our natural inclination is to fight for what we believe. It is natural and it's okay, but not during a search. Not when you are an inquirer. Number 4, respect. Respect is used many times to denote agreement. But respect is not agreement. In fact, respect shines out even brighter when there is disagreement. And you still respect the person. Respect also sometimes is synonymous with admiration. But respect is not necessarily admiration. So it's neither agreement by itself nor admiration. It is simply this, allowing for the other whatever rights we feel is our due. I want to do a search in a certain way, and I should allow anybody else to do a search in their own way. And I would expect, in return, that you give me the same respect. Respect will never allow us to look down our noses at so-and-so and call them insulting names and hurl some insinuation, slip in some damaging insinuations just to knock them off. Or be condescendingly pitiful. No. Respect will allow them the same rights that you wanted for yourself. So these 4, humility, honesty, calmness, and respect. If we have all these 4, I believe we've paved our road with an atmosphere that will take us the distance. But how shall we apply it practically to our meeting and our search? I see you are quite comfortably seated, so I will not ask you to stand up. Usually in the seminar that I present, I ask the attendees to stand up and take some deep breaths. So while you're seated itself, let's take some deep breaths. We need some oxygen going up to our brains. It's the 2-2-4 principle. Take a breath for 2 counts, hold it for 2 counts, and then let it go for 4 counts. Ready? Take a deep breath. 1, 2, hold it. 1, 2, let go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Once again. Take a deep breath. 1, 2, hold. 1, 2, let go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now just pretend you're standing, because that's the ritual that I usually take you through. I'm not going to ask you to stand, so you're okay. But the reason I ask them to stand and take a deep breath is because now we're going to do another little ritual to help us with these 4. And the ritual is this. Draw an imaginary circle around your feet. Done? All right, simple. And now just take your feet out of that circle. All right, now let's ask ourselves what the circle was. The circle is all the philosophies, doctrines, and religion that you now hold. So what you really did was step out of them and join me as a person on the street. No loyalty to any religion, doctrine, or philosophy. Once you go out to the street and become just an ordinary person there, then you are free to inquire. You are free to go any direction that the evidence points to. Are you with me? So you've joined me now on the street. You are not a Hindu, you're not a Muslim, you're not a Buddhist, you're not a Christian, you're not a nobody. Just an ordinary person like me on the street, and from that point we're going to ask the questions that we started out already. We have the first question already. Is there a God or is there not a God in existence? And so let's get on with the question now. We are all inquirers.